A 911 call came in about a woman lying at the bottom of a staircase outside an apartment complex. At first, it looked like a terrible accident. Maybe she tripped and fell. Her purse, keys, and wallet were scattered around her, but nothing seemed stolen. Even her money was still there, so it didn't look like a robbery. But something felt off. When first responders arrived, they quickly realized this wasn't just a simple fall. And when detectives took a closer look, they found something shocking, something that turned this from an accident into a full-blown murder investigation. So, what really happened to Denita Smith, and who wanted her dead? Denita Smith was born on November 10, 1981, in New Bern, North Carolina. She was the pride and joy of her parents, Dale and Laverne Smith, who adored her deeply. Growing up in a loving household alongside her three siblings, Derek, Darius, and Danielle, Denita's energy and enthusiasm for life were impossible to ignore. Even from a young age, she had an undeniable presence that made her stand out. Friends and family often described Denita as someone who could light up any room. Her warmth, kindness, and infectious smile made her unforgettable. Anyone who met her would quickly realize she had a natural ability to bring joy to those around her. Looking at her photos, it was clear her happiness radiated through every image, capturing the essence of someone who truly embraced life. Academically, Denita was a dedicated and hard-working student. Her teachers praised her commitment to excellence, and her efforts paid off when she graduated high school with honors. She then pursued higher education at North Carolina Central University, initially majoring in English. However, during her college years, Denita discovered a newfound passion: photojournalism. She became deeply fascinated by the power of visual storytelling and the way a single photograph could evoke emotions and tell compelling narratives. With her characteristic determination, she pursued this passion and quickly earned a reputation for her exceptional photography skills. In her personal life, Denita found happiness with her fiancé, Jer Stad, a young police officer from Greensboro, North Carolina. The two met in college and built a strong relationship over 6 years before Jer proposed. For Denita, their engagement marked the beginning of an exciting new chapter, one filled with dreams of marriage, career success, and building a future together. However, there was one challenge they faced: distance. After graduating in 2004, Jer moved to Greensboro for his job as a police officer, while Denita remained in Durham. Though only about an hour apart, their separation meant they couldn't see each other daily, making their relationship more reliant on weekend visits. Unfortunately, the physical distance may have created an emotional gap as well. Unbeknownst to Denita, Jer had become involved with a colleague, Shannon Crawley, a 911 dispatcher and a single mother of 2. On the morning of January 4, 2007, just after 10 a.m., a frantic 911 call came in from a male resident of Durham, North Carolina. He reported an alarming scene outside an apartment complex: a woman lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by blood. When first responders arrived at the scene, it was already too late. The woman on the ground was unresponsive, just as the caller had feared. Moments later, authorities confirmed the victim's identity. It was Denita Smith. Detective Sean Pate from the Durham Police Department took charge of the investigation, arriving at the scene to assess the situation. At first glance, it appeared that Denita had suffered a tragic fall. Her personal belongings, keys, purse, and wallet, were scattered around her, reinforcing the idea that she might have lost her balance. As officers examined her possessions, they noticed something unusual. Her wallet still contained a significant amount of cash. If this had been a robbery, it was unlikely the perpetrator would have left the money behind. This led investigators to question whether theft had anything to do with Denita's death. No cameras had captured what had transpired. However, as authorities took a closer look at Denita's body, it became clear that she had not simply fallen, she had been murdered. A fatal gunshot wound to the head was discovered. Her body's position had initially concealed the wound, leading to the assumption that she had simply fallen down the stairs. With this shocking revelation, law enforcement immediately began canvassing the area for witnesses. The apartment complex, which primarily housed students, was usually bustling with activity. However, due to the holiday season, fewer residents were around. Despite this, officers managed to locate a few individuals who had seen something suspicious. The most valuable testimony came from the complex's maintenance director. He told investigators that he had seen a woman fleeing the scene around the time of the incident. She was described as a tall black woman with a fair complexion, driving a burgundy SUV. This key detail raised immediate suspicions. Could this woman be connected to Denita's murder? Interestingly, the maintenance director had not only seen the woman, he had spoken with her. He heard a gunshot and noticed the woman appeared visibly shaken. When he asked if she had heard the gunfire, she admitted that she had and seemed extremely upset. He even suggested that she meet him at another location so they could report the incident to the police together. Instead, she left the scene. Though the maintenance worker eventually called 911, his call was not the one that initially brought first responders to the complex. In fact, a separate 911 call had been made about an hour earlier, but when officers arrived, they found nothing unusual. No body, no evidence of a shooting. How was this possible? Had Denita's body somehow gone unnoticed? The apartment complex was large, but it seemed odd that the first response team had missed such a critical discovery. As news of Denita's death spread, her loved ones rushed to the scene. Among them was her fiancé, Jay. Upon arrival, he sought out Detective Pate, eager to speak with him. As is standard in homicide investigations, authorities looked closely at the victim's significant other. When asked about his whereabouts that morning, Jay stated that he had been at home sleeping after working late the night before. However, he had no one to corroborate his alibi. While it wasn't the strongest defense, police were still gathering information, so they noted his statement and allowed him to leave. After spending some time with Denita's family, Jay headed home. But the next day, investigators reached out again with additional questions. One key inquiry stood out. Did Jay know anyone who drove a burgundy SUV? His response changed everything. Without hesitation, he provided a name: Shannon Crawley. The revelation immediately shifted the focus of the investigation. Initially, there had been speculation that Jay himself could have been involved, but now another person had entered the picture. When questioned further, Jay admitted that he had been involved in an affair with Shannon. He stated that their romantic relationship had ended nearly a year earlier, calling it a mistake. According to him, their relationship had come to a breaking point when Shannon became pregnant in 2005. They ultimately decided on an abortion, which signaled the end of their romance, at least from his perspective. While he insisted their relationship had ended, Shannon had remained in his life. Though no longer romantically involved, the two still spoke frequently. According to him, they had a strong friendship, but nothing more. However, it became apparent that Shannon may not have seen things the same way. Even after their breakup, Shannon continued to maintain a presence in Jay's life. She started attending his church, something he initially dismissed as coincidence. Then, she purchased a home near his, which he also brushed off, assuming she had simply chosen a desirable area. But as investigators pieced together the timeline, it became clear that Shannon's attachment to Jay had never truly faded. According to Jay, Denita and Shannon had never crossed paths. However, as he spoke to investigators, he admitted something unsettling. He now believed Shannon had been stalking him for quite some time. Though he hadn't realized it before, certain details were starting to click into place. He emphasized once again that he had been the one to end their relationship. Then came another critical detail. The last time he had seen Shannon was on Christmas Eve of 2006, less than 2 weeks before Denita's murder. That night, he walked into church, proudly escorting his fiancée, Denita, by his side. Shannon was there. Her reaction was one of complete shock. She had no idea that Jay was engaged, perhaps not even that he was in a relationship at all. Up until that moment, Shannon may have believed that they were on the verge of rekindling their romance. But now, she was faced with the undeniable truth: Jay had moved on. And not only that, he was about to marry someone else. Investigators now had enough reason to speak directly with Shannon. They visited her workplace to question her about her whereabouts on the morning of the murder. Shannon claimed she had been at home caring for her sick child. She openly admitted to having a past relationship with Jay, making no attempt to hide their history. However, her version of events differed significantly from what Jay had told police. According to Shannon, their relationship had ended because she didn't want to have children. This contradicted Jay's claim that their relationship ended when she became pregnant and had an abortion. When asked whether she knew Denita, Shannon stated that she had never met her. She explained that she believed Denita was Jay's ex-girlfriend. But given what investigators now knew, this response raised suspicions. It seemed likely that Jay had kept his two lives completely separate, leading Shannon to believe she was the only woman in his life. The next question was crucial. Did Shannon own a firearm? She answered no. However, investigators soon discovered that she was lying. A new witness came forward, Ronald Simpson, a coworker of Shannon's. Simpson revealed that Shannon had purchased a revolver from him in October 2006. This revelation was damning. The firearm matched the caliber of the gun used in Denita's murder. Not only had Shannon lied about owning a weapon, but she had purchased it just months before Denita was killed. Meanwhile, detectives examined phone records from both Shannon and Jay. Jay's records indicated that his phone had been in his home during the time of the murder, aligning with his alibi. Of course, this didn't completely clear him. Someone else could have been using his phone while he was elsewhere. But it was a promising lead in his favor. Shannon's phone, however, told a very different story. Despite her claim that she had been home all morning, cell tower data placed her in Durham, approximately 60 miles from where she was supposed to be. This put her near the crime scene at the time of the murder. When confronted, Shannon continued to insist she hadn't been in Durham that day, but the evidence was stacking up against her. Police then seized Shannon's burgundy SUV and ran forensic tests. Their primary focus was detecting any traces of gunshot residue. The results were conclusive. Gunshot residue was found on the steering wheel. This meant that, at some point, Shannon had likely fired a weapon and then driven her vehicle. The presence of the residue on the steering wheel strongly suggested she had done so just before or after getting behind the wheel. One final piece of the puzzle remained: the witness testimony from the maintenance worker who had spoken to the woman fleeing the scene. Though there was no official record of a lineup, the man had consistently described the suspect as a tall black woman with a fair complexion driving a burgundy SUV, and that description matched Shannon Crawley perfectly. On January 9, 2007, Shannon was taken into custody and formally charged with the murder of Denita Smith. Surprisingly, despite the serious nature of the charges, Shannon was released shortly after on a $100,000 bond. She had no prior criminal history, which likely played a role in the court's decision. Additionally, as a 911 dispatcher and the sole caretaker of her two young children, she fit the profile of someone who might receive leniency, especially when it came to setting bail. But Shannon wasn't content to wait for trial. In May 2007, just a few months after her arrest, she and her attorney made an unexpected move. They voluntarily walked into the Durham Police Department to present their own version of events. What she told them completely flipped the narrative. Shannon now claimed that Jermier had been the one stalking her after their breakup. She alleged that he frequently called her, showed up at her workplace unannounced, and made her feel unsafe. According to Shannon, a concerned coworker had even offered her a gun for protection, knowing that Jermier carried a firearm as a police officer. She admitted to taking the weapon but insisted she regretted the decision and disposed of it soon after. Then she dropped a bombshell. Shannon told police that on the morning of Denita's murder, Jermier had forced her into her own vehicle at gunpoint. She claimed he made her drive to an unfamiliar apartment complex, Denita's residence, where he took her phone and keys before stepping out of the car. She described waiting in the car for a long period, unsure of what was happening, until she suddenly heard shouting. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized Jermier's voice arguing with a woman. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. According to Shannon, Jermier sprinted back to the car in a panic and ordered her to drive. She said he climbed into the back seat, crouching down on the floor while urging her to leave as quickly as possible. She also claimed this was when she encountered the maintenance worker. In her version of events, she briefly stopped, hoping he would recognize that she was in distress, but she ultimately drove away because Jermier had his gun pressed to her back. However, there were immediate problems with her story. First, how did she explain the gunshot residue found on the steering wheel of her car? She told police that, at some point during their escape, Jermier had grabbed the wheel while moving from the front seat to the back, leaving behind residue. Second, why was her phone detected near the crime scene when she claimed she had never been there? She had no reasonable explanation for this. Investigators wasted no time confronting Jermier with Shannon's claims. He vehemently denied every accusation, maintaining that he had been at home during the time of the murder. His cell phone records supported this, though they weren't definitive proof. After all, someone could have used his phone to establish an alibi. Meanwhile, Shannon remained free on bond. She received permission to relocate to Charlotte, about 100 miles away, so she could live with her family. But even that wasn't the end of the drama. In June 2008, Shannon made yet another shocking allegation, this time accusing Jer of attacking her. According to Shannon, she had been out walking her dog early in the morning when Jer suddenly appeared outside her family's home. She claimed he assaulted her at knife point and held her captive for several hours, subjecting her to sexual violence. The police immediately launched an investigation, and what they found completely discredited her claim. A medical examination revealed no evidence of sexual assault. More importantly, surveillance footage confirmed that Jer had been nowhere near Shannon that morning. He was accounted for in his hometown, making it physically impossible for him to have been at the scene of the alleged attack. With her accusation completely disproven, police concluded that Shannon had fabricated the entire story. Despite this, Shannon remained out on bond for nearly 2 more years before her case finally went to trial. On February 8, 2010, the trial began. The prosecution argued that Shannon had become obsessed with Jer and saw Denita as an obstacle standing in the way of her future with him. Her motive, they claimed, was fueled by jealousy and a desperate desire to remove the competition. Meanwhile, the defense maintained that Shannon was being set up, that the real perpetrator was none other than Jer himself. However, she never provided a specific reason why he would have done it. Instead, she repeatedly described him as violent and controlling, painting a picture of a man who was dangerous and unpredictable. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury would hear about Shannon's past false allegations against Jer, including the rape accusation that had been thoroughly disproven. Her legal team fought aggressively to keep this out of the trial, but they lost. The court allowed the jury to consider the fact that she had made false claims in the past, a devastating blow to her credibility. Jer took the stand as the prosecution's star witness. He spoke about his relationship with Shannon, their breakup, and the troubling behavior she displayed afterward. He was well-spoken and presented himself as composed and credible. However, when it was the defense's turn to cross-examine, they made sure to highlight one critical flaw. Jer had spent years deceiving both Shannon and Denita. Then, the prosecution introduced a crucial piece of forensic evidence: the bullet fragment recovered from Denita's body. While the murder weapon itself had never been found, forensic experts confirmed that the bullet matched the type of gun Shannon had purchased just months before the crime. Shannon also took the stand. She repeated the same story she had told police, insisting that Jer had forced her to accompany him to Denita's apartment, that she had no idea what was happening, and that she was merely an unwilling participant. She delivered her testimony with confidence, never wavering under questioning. For a moment, it seemed like she was holding her own. Then, the prosecution revealed what would be her undoing: tape recordings. Shannon had secretly recorded conversations with Jer after Denita's murder, supposedly in an effort to get him to confess. These tapes had been provided to her defense team, but they had chosen not to use them. That alone was suspicious. The prosecution, however, had no reservations about playing the recordings in court. In the recordings, Shannon could be heard questioning Jer about what had happened. At one point, he asked who she had been talking to. She denied speaking to anyone, but he continued to press her. Then, he issued what seemed to be a chilling threat, warning that if she kept talking, he would find her. The voice on the recording sounded unusually high-pitched, nothing like Jer's natural speaking voice. The prosecution seized the opportunity, pointing out the discrepancy. Even Denita's friends and family, who knew Jer well, testified that the voice on the tape didn't sound like him at all. The implication was clear: Shannon had staged the recordings. The prosecution suggested that she had hired someone to impersonate Jer, trying to fabricate evidence to shift the blame onto him. By this point, Shannon's credibility had been completely dismantled. In the end, the jury found Shannon Crawley guilty of Denita Smith's murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for Jer, he eventually left law enforcement and pursued a career in financial advising. He moved on with his life, getting married and starting a family. Yet, in the end, no outcome could undo the tragic loss of Denita Smith. By all accounts, she was a remarkable woman with a bright future. She had so much left to accomplish, so many dreams that would never come to fruition.